Cape students are back at school and tourists are coming back. There are so many questions about how all this is going to work in the era of COVID-19. So that's the focus of our upcoming RGR Gleaner Group virtual town hall meeting. That's going to be taking place Thursday at 8:35 p.m. So we want you to send in your questions, video questions as well, to 3810072. That's Hot Vertical. Send in also your comments and your responses that you want us to include in the town hall. We look forward to seeing you.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here to see our full videos on one.
For the Ministry of Health and Wellness's digital press conference and COVID-19 conversation, we apologize for the late start. We'll press ahead with our updates. We have joining us today the Minister of Health and Wellness, Dr. the Honorable Christopher Tufton, also the Chief Medical Officer of Jamaica, Dr. Jacqueline Biseso McKenzie, and later on we'll be joined by Senator the Honorable Camilla Johnson Smith, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, and the Honorable Edmund Bartlett, the Minister of Tourism. We'll begin now with the latest information on COVID-19 in Jamaica, and we invite our Honorable Minister to make that presentation.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Good evening, one and all. We thank you very much for joining us. Looking forward to a quick but thorough discussion around the COVID-19 response, and this, of course, is from the perspective of the Ministry of Health and Wellness. We have, since the beginning of this COVID-19 response, been providing the public with at least one weekly update, and of course the other from the Office of the Prime Minister in terms of the overall national strategy. So our focus primarily is on public health and the role we're playing, and we hope through these sessions to provide enough information to ensure that we manage the process in a transparent way and get the public to understand what is happening and to play their part as we attempt to overcome the challenges. As usual, we will begin with the update on the numbers today, and then we will have a brief presentation by the Chief Medical Officer on numbers that have come in. You will recall that we have relaxed restrictions on persons coming in, Jamaicans, and we started with the cruise lines and the Jamaican workers. Then we moved in a more aggressive way to the airports, even though we had started that slowly before, but we have been, since June 1, made more flights available and have brought in more Jamaicans. So we're going to look at those numbers. The Chief Medical Officer, and we've been doing testing, so she will assess the test results to give the public a better understanding. And then we will have as said earlier, the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade will give her perspective. She has played a very important part in the coordination of Jamaicans overseas, and then the Minister of Tourism, who himself has been championing the cause of tourism and balancing the need to respond to the public health challenges while at the same time responding to the important industry of tourism. And he will join us by Zoom. Minister Johnson Smith will come in shortly. So the following is the latest update of the results of tests that have been done Thursday, June 11th, 2020. Tests done over the last 24 hours. Jamaica has recorded some 6 new cases of COVID-19 in the last 24 hours. This brings the total number of confirmed cases to 611. The new cases were all imported, 4 arriving on a flight from the United States and 2 on a flight from the United Kingdom. Their ages range from 38 to 63 years. So that's 6 new cases confirmed, 4 from the US, 2 on a flight from the United Kingdom, ages from 38 to 63 years. The new cases are comprised of 5 females and 1 male. 2 of the cases are from the parish of St. Elizabeth, another 2 from St. James, 1 each from Portland and St. Catherine. They bring to a 110 the number of imported cases. In addition, 219 cases are contacts of confirmed cases. 39 are local transmission cases not epidemiologically linked, and 236 are related to a workplace cluster, which we all know in St. Catherine, and 7 are under investigation. 354 or 57.9% of the 611 confirmed cases are females, and 42.1% or 257 are males. They range, of course, from 2 months to 87 years. In terms of recovery, in the last 24 hours, the island has had 1 additional recovery, putting our overall recovery numbers at 408 or 66.8%. So even though the number 1 is not a lot, the overall percentages of recovery, 68%, 66.8%, is moving us in the right direction, and we're very happy for that. Further, there are currently 2 critically ill cases and none who are moderately ill. And you will know that what we are very keen on watching the critically ill related to COVID, because as we have said earlier in previous press briefings, the key is to try and prevent death. And once you are critically ill, it means that the risk has significantly increased. Of course, our medical team are working to try and address and to ensure that we provide the best care to those individuals. In terms of testing, the island's testing numbers are up to 15,478. That's 15,478 with 325 new samples tested in the last 24 hours. So that's 325 over the last 24 hours. Of note is that we also did 105 discharge samples in the last day, meaning that samples collected, and depending on how those samples turn out, if they are negative, then those persons are going to be sent home. If they are positive, of course, they will remain for another 4 or 5 days before they are tested again. Of the 15,478 samples tested, in addition to the 611 positives, there are 14,822 negatives and 45 are pending. I want to comment briefly on the individuals who are placed at the 138 student living at the University of the West Indies. There have been some discussions in the media, or at least in one printed media recently. Ministry of Health and Wellness notes the concerns of persons in isolation at the newly commissioned facility here in Kingston. That's 138 student living. Even as we look into the particulars of the patient at that facility, I want to remind those in facilities across the island and others quarantined at home of our testing protocol. And I think that's where I think some of the concerns have been raised because of some ambiguity or maybe lack of understanding or misunderstanding around the protocols. Samples are taken at care sites and transported to the National Public Health Lab in Kingston. Lab operations occur throughout the 24-hour period as part of the COVID-19 response, with testing done in batches. And at the current volume of samples received and scheduling of staff, results are returned in about 24 to 36 hours. However, and it's important to note, this period may be lengthened on occasion for a variety of reasons, including a delay in the transportation of samples held as more processing is required, or retesting is required as of samples because samples may be compromised or for which an invalid report was generated by the machine. So there are many reasons why we may need to retake samples or why samples may be delayed. Remember now, this process, even though efficient, the PCR testing that is and the modern machinery that is involved does have downtime. And when we have the downtimes, then it obviously contributes to delay in test results. Having said that, it's not something that we are happy about. We don't want to inconvenience persons who are waiting for results, and as a consequence, we regret where persons have to wait longer than we have committed. But it's not a precise science because of the mechanical processes that are involved, and frankly speaking, because of the limited staff that we have and the numbers that we're dealing with at any one point in time. So delays will occur. However, we'll work to ensure that we can adjust and overcome those delays. And we ask those persons to just be patient. If we need to communicate more, I've asked for greater communication, better particulars so persons understand. And if we're at fault in that regard, then I will do what I can as minister and certainly encourage the team to do more to provide better particulars. Of note, however, is that most testing is being done for surveillance purposes and results are provided in line listing format. Where the testing is done for diagnostic purposes, results are prepared for issuance to the attending clinician and placed into the individual's files. As soon as the results become available, they are given to the patient verbally. Copies of the results may be obtained on request for medical records or part thereof using the established procedures. As part of our containment efforts, discharge protocol for those who return on initial positive tests dictates that persons return 2 negative test results before they can be discharged. And again, that is worth emphasizing or repeating. When you are positive, for you to be discharged, the protocol is you have to have 2 negative tests within is it 48 hours? Within a 48-hour period. And if you do one and it's negative and do another and it's positive, then you have to wait a few days in order to do another test. And I think it's important for us to get persons to appreciate and understand that and recognize that that contributes sometimes to what is perceived as delays. So we do understand the anxieties involved in this process in waiting for test results, but we continue to ask persons to be patient and to work with the process because it is necessary, it is important, it's about their protection, but importantly it's about the protection of their families, the communities, and by extension, the country. So just to recap the main information for today. Last 24 hours, we've had 6 new cases, positive cases of COVID from tests done. We have, of that 6, 4 arriving on flight from the United States, 2 from the United Kingdom, and age ranges from 38 to 63 years. We have done some 325 new samples were tested during that 24-hour period, and we have done some 15,478 tests since we have started to test. So that's it for the basic updates. I'm going to now just ask the chief medical officer to quickly run through the numbers of that have been coming in since, is it April 20? April 20. Right, so she'll give the overall numbers of persons, and this again is in keeping with just providing information around the opening up or the easing of restrictions, starting with some organized flights, special flights, then going into the cruise workers, ship workers, and then more recently from June 1, a more aggressive return of Jamaicans who live abroad. CMO, you want to take it from here?
Stephen? All right, so we have been returning Jamaicans to the country since April 20th. We actually opened our borders to the return of the cruise shippers who came in from May the 6th. And from May the 6th until, I think it was May the 26th, we returned 1,662 persons from the cruise ships. Since June the 1st up until now, we have opened our borders to the returning residents who have been coming in through flights at Sangsters International and at Norman Manley International. But prior to that, we had two flights that had come in, one on April the 20th, when we had the returns of involuntary return migrants, and then also we had a flight from Antigua. So in total, we have returned over 3,289 Jamaicans in all since April the 20th. Since June the 1st, we have had 22 flights, 15 flights that have come in through the Norman Manley International Airport, and 7 flights through the Sangsters International Airport. A total of 989 passengers, with 566 through Norman Manley International Airport and 423 through Sangsters International Airport. Now, over that period, in terms of the number of positive cases, just to look at our overall positivity rate, in terms of 611 positives, we've had an overall positive rate for the country of 4%. But in terms of the persons that have returned, you have that. In terms of the persons that have returned, we have had 49 persons that have been positive from the cruise ship returns, which is about 3% positive rate. And we have had 26 other persons from the other flights that have come in, which is about a 1.6% positive rate. So overall, the numbers of positive cases that we're getting from the returning residents it's not over or general overall figures. And so therefore, Minister, I would say that over the last 2 weeks, our experience in terms of our testing of the returning residents have been good. It does suggest that Jamaicans overseas have been taking the necessary precautions in terms of keeping themselves safe and preventing themselves from becoming infected. And so that harbors good. We know that when the persons return, there will be a risk of exposure, because persons would have had some exposure, and we do expect that there would be some positive cases that are coming into country. But so far, based on this sampling of persons coming in, we have not had a large number of cases. It means, though, that the persons that are coming in have a large responsibility, because we know that even though the first testing coming in may be negative, they may be in an incubation period and they may become positive during the time that they're at home. And so therefore, that risk has to be managed. And that risk has to be managed by a sense of personal responsibility, that we're imploring Jamaicans that are coming in to remember that they need to stay at home. They need to take all the necessary precautionary measures to protect themselves and protecting their family members from a possible exposure to COVID-19. And so they therefore should pay attention to their hygiene practices in terms of the washing of the hands, the using of the hand sanitizer, to staying away as much as possible from their vulnerable relatives, persons who may be over the age of 60, persons who have comorbid illnesses, because those persons are at risk from getting severe illnesses if they do become infected with the disease. We also ask them that during that period, that if they should develop any kind of symptoms, such as a cough, sore throat, shortness of breath, a fever, that they must contact the health department immediately, because at that time they would need to be tested again to see if there is any evidence of them developing COVID-19 and for the necessary precautionary measures to be put in place. So personal responsibility is very, very important for these persons that are coming in. Jamaicans on a whole, I think, have gotten the message that they must carry out all of these precautions in order to stop transmission of COVID. But I would just want to implore the persons that are coming into country who probably have not been exposed to the intense public education campaign that we've had since February of this year to stay at home, take the necessary precautions to prevent the spread of COVID-19.
Thank you very much, CMO, for that overview and the numbers coming in. While we have been joined by our two ministers, my two colleagues, Senator Johnson Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, who is sitting to my right in studio, if you will. Thank you very much, Minister, for joining us. Really appreciate the time, the effort. And online or on Zoom, we have Minister Edmund Bartlett, the Minister of Tourism, who I know is very busy and still working and has taken time out to join us in a conversation. Thank you very much and welcome, Minister Bartlett, for being here. So combined, we wanted to have a conversation just to give an update, given that June 1 represents a shift in terms of further relaxation for Jamaicans coming in, June 1 to 14th, as announced by the Prime Minister, and then 15th onwards, or 15th to 30th, non-Jamaicans. There is a conversation that needs to be had. There are Jamaicans and non-Jamaicans who are curious, who wants to understand exactly what that means. My brief comment for emphasis on the CMO's overview is that having done the test for Jamaicans coming in, I think we can conclude so far, based on those tests, that the number of positives that we have picked up are encouraging, in that it's not negatives that we have picked up. The number of negatives that we have picked up are encouraging. The number of positives are not encouraging, but they are very low. And that's a very positive thing. So it's a process that we will continue to review and evaluate. It was a necessary process up to this point because it gave public health an indication as to what is happening as it relates to our population and those who are coming in. And it is this kind of information that will be used, therefore, to make other determinations, which we are currently in discussions around, as it relates to testing, as it relates to the protocols that are involved. And as we go along, the intention is to review and to adjust as we move the process forward. So the fact that we have a 1.6% positive from the Jamaicans coming in and 3% from the cruises is an indication of where the risk lies, and then gives us an opportunity now to make appropriate adjustments where necessary for those risks. And I see Minister Bartlett online now in full view. Mr. Bartlett, thank you for being on, sir. Welcome. I'm not hearing you. Maybe you have to unmute your mic.
Thank you, Minister.
Okay, great, excellent. So I'm going to ask Minister Johnson Smith, given that those Jamaicans coming in would represent our diaspora community, certainly from the U.S., and Minister Johnson Smith has really been championing that cause, providing all the critical coordination, and we thought it was necessary to have her on to give her overview, and then we have a number of questions which I think she will help in helping to create the understanding of the process. So, Minister Johnson Smith.
Thank you, Minister, for having me. Good afternoon to everyone here. Minister Bartlett, I don't know how you wrangled it. I was trying to zoom in as well, but I ended up having to zoom in behind the steering wheel. But
because I'm a baby boomer, so I'm a zoomer.
But it's a pleasure to be here, and it's on the tail end of positive news, as we've just heard about the low positive test rate from our Jamaicans who have been returning over the past, and in increasing numbers over the past 2 weeks, or rather within this 2-week phase from the 1st to the 14th, which is an enhanced controlled reentry phase. We're celebrating the good news that this Sunday we welcomed 154 Jamaicans from the UK. We've been welcoming persons from Florida and New York primarily, but although those are the ports of departure, persons have of course been making their way to those states in order to catch flights out. We anticipate that, Minister, when you speak, you'll speak about the increasing number of flights that we are having coming online, both for Jamaicans and non-Jamaicans. And part of that is the positive story that the more people who want to travel and who want to come to Jamaica, is the more airlines will fly, and the more that that we are able to stimulate the sectors on which our workers rely in Jamaica. So we look forward to that as well. But one of the good things that's been happening this week as well is we've had flights coming from Cayman, because we've had a fair number of persons there who have really been reaching out, just very much in need of return. And we have finally been able, and I must express publicly, thanks to the government of Trinidad and Tobago for having worked with us in moving from their original position, which was to arrange repatriation flights from their students from UA and Cave Hill campuses, and the Barbadian students from Mona and St. Augustine to Barbados. We have been able to discuss and arrange for Cal to be given permission to come to Jamaica and to run repatriation flights. So we have now scheduled flights to bring Jamaicans home, not just students, but all nationals who have been impacted by COVID restrictions and had flights cancelled on them since we closed our borders. We have Jamaicans coming from Trinidad and Tobago on Saturday, and also on Saturday flying from Barbados. We are also working on finalizing flights from Bahamas and Antigua and Barbuda, which will round out our largest populations of Jamaicans stranded within the Caribbean. Cayman is being dealt with through flights from Cayman Airways, and those have been running quite well as well. This is really very good news, because it has been frustrating for our Jamaicans overseas, and they're not diasporans. Strictly speaking, diasporans have gone away to live. They have a new host country where they have made a life. These persons were traveling for business or vacation or school or some short stay program, and were caught by the borders, and therefore they either didn't have the resources to continue to sustain a comfortable existence or to sustain themselves at all. Some have been on the care of the honorary consuls or our missions overseas through emergency support provided, whether from headquarters at the ministry here or through reaching out to the diaspora communities in those locations. So when our urgent cases are able to return to their families, it is one of the best feelings in the world. And we're at a good place now. And knowing now that our Jamaicans overseas have been taking care, they have been wearing their masks, they have been following all of the rules about sanitation and physical distancing. So we know when they come back, they will also have the discipline to follow the rules that we have here. They remember that we're in a pandemic, and when they come back, we know that they'll be responsible citizens and adhere to the rules that we have implemented, not only for their safety, but for the safety of the families and communities to whom they return. So again, we're at a good stage. The process is, Minister, I understand you were on the ground at the airport this week. So you are also seeing that they have managed to cut down the processing time. So thanks to all the frontline workers, public health workers, immigration, the JDF, everyone who's been involved in logistics, even JUTC, and the team that's been headed by Minister Samuda in convening all of the moving parts to ensure that the best possible experience is taking place in uncomfortable circumstances. So I want to thank him for the effort that he's been putting out as well, and for all of the members of his team. And always, of course, to thank the AMBER team that's been giving us the technical support, that developed and has been giving us technical support on the Jam COVID app, because we have simplified the process. It's no longer a two-stage process. It's a one-stage process now. It takes far less time and is far more simple. And my call is again, in closing, Minister, before I hand over to you once more, is for persons who want to come back home to complete the Jam COVID app. If you have completed your app and you've gotten your confirmation that you have applied, you've gotten your case number, you don't need to apply again, but you should log back in to see if there are questions for you to answer, because that may be the reason your application has not been processed. If your application has not been processed and you have answered the questions, click on the FAQ link, on the frequently asked questions link on the Jam COVID immigration site, and you will see numbers there and an email address that you can use to have somebody follow up on your problems for you. Okay? Don't try and tweet me. I might miss your tweet because I manage it myself. So it's not the best way to get assistance. You might get it, but you might not. So try the call-in line and the email that's on the Jam COVID-19 app. Just click on FAQs or frequently asked questions and you'll find the help that you need.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that update. And as you heard the Minister, she's always available, but follow the process, and as many have so far and have gotten through. Minister, I'm sure that there are many questions for you, because I think we have well over 100 questions coming in online so far, but we're not gonna be able to take all of them. We'll filter the ones that and look for the duplications and so on. So too, I believe, Minister Bartlett. But before we're going to do a quick video, very, very short video, I visited the Kingston Norman Manley Airport and observed the work there. And Minister, you're right. The health staff, the other critical agencies, the JDF, the constabulary, immigration, customs, I tell you, it is really joined up government at work. And it's an amazing operation, and I really thought it was important to expose what is happening to the populace so Jamaicans know that the government and those involved are working to make the process as smooth as possible. Take a look just for a minute. We are here at Norman Manley International Airport, where I did a tour to look at the processing of Jamaicans who are coming in. The process starts, of course, while they're in the other country. They fill out the Jam COVID form and get approval. Then, of course, they come in. They are required to fill out some additional information. Samples are collected for testing, and then they are locked on to the software, the Jam COVID software, to provide the geofencing. And then, of course, the immigration does its processing, and then they are allowed to take their luggage and leave. Of course, there are restrictions on movement over a 2-week period in terms of the stay at home, and also based on the samples that are taken. Then we make contact with them. If they are positive, then they are placed into isolation arrangements. If not, then they have to stay within the confines of the stay at home orders that the Prime Minister announced. It was a relatively seamless process today. I think that on average persons took anywhere between 30 and 40 minutes to complete the process, which to my mind is normal when you go through an airport under normal circumstances. Of course, these are limited numbers, and so the process will have to be reviewed as time goes by, as we ramp up the numbers. But I think for the most part, persons understand the system, and I just want to use the opportunity just to thank the teams representing the different agencies, Ministry of National Security, Health, Transport, Office of the Prime Minister, who are all collaborating to ensure that we can bring our Jamaicans home. And I want to thank the Jamaicans who have come in, because they have been very cooperative and have followed the guidelines from start to finish. So another successful, I think, approach to bringing more Jamaicans. We will continue to review the process, and there will be additional changes over time. But again, I hope Jamaicans understand this is all in the aim of ensuring that we manage the COVID risk in support and the protection of our population. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. So there you have it, just a sneak preview. And if you looked at that video carefully, you would have seen the numbers that are involved in the process. There were 60 healthcare workers on location, all fitted out in personal protective gear. If you add the immigration and custom officials, the security forces, the support staff, you're looking at well over 100 persons who are in a process, because there are stages of the process. And just the discussion with the Jamaicans who came out on the outside, having completed that process. I did not meet anyone who was complaining. They were all very pleased. They were very complimentary, and that process works. The challenge, of course, if we are to be totally frank and transparent, is that it works well when the numbers are not so large. In this instance, it was 100 persons, thereabouts. Jamaicans move back and forth outside of Jamaica, and non-Jamaicans in by the thousands. And so what Jamaicans need to appreciate is that this process is intended to understand the nature of the virus, to give the best possible protection at a particular point in time. And once that data is gathered and assessed, the public health and the government generally gets a better sense of how to make the adjustments over time. Ultimately, it's about getting back to normality. It may be a new norm. It may involve some other processes to ensure that we screen with particular reference to COVID-19. But ultimately, we want to ensure that Jamaicans and non-Jamaicans can move about freely. And what we ask the population to do is to be understanding until we get to that point. I think we're traveling well, and I think the collaboration is evidence of that. The numbers that we have reported is evidence of that. And so I think the lessons that we are learning as we experience this novel virus is going to do well for us as we move the process forward. So on the 15th of June, as announced by the Honorable Prime Minister, we will see non-nationals being allowed through the JamCOVID site to come into the island. And I'm sure there's a lot of anticipation. It has implications for many non-nationals, persons who are working here, long-term work, short-term work, and persons who want to vacation, relax, and enjoy the beauty of our country that Minister Bartlett has done so well to promote and to give support to. And so we know that that anticipation is there. So we wanted to engage in a brief conversation around those expectations. And Minister Bartlett is online, so I'm going to hand over to him just to give his overview. There are questions, and I suspect the questions will be the more exciting conversation. So I'll give him an opportunity to give a brief overview, and then we go into the questions. Thank you, Minister Bartlett.
Thank you very much, Minister Tufton, Minister Kamina Johnson-Smith, and all the partners who are connected with this Zoom conversation this afternoon, and the many, 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 many others who are in Zoom land somewhere listening and no doubt will participate at some point. So June 15th begins the other phase of the opening of our borders, and we'll see the entry of a number of international visitors to our country to continue to enjoy the wonders of Jamaica and to explore our cultural assets and no doubt to consume so many aspects of it. We have, and I want to begin by really saying how much of a partnership this whole process has been and how deeply connected all of us have been and how closely knitted we have also been, both as a cabinet and certainly in terms of the specific ministry areas that have had to work extremely close, health being definitely at the center of it, foreign affairs, transportation, security, and I could go on and on. We have in tourism developed 5 critical guidelines for the reopening of the industry. And the first is to develop a robust health and security protocol with dealing with our local as well as international partners, and a set of protocols, in fact, which could stand both local and international scrutiny. And I'm very pleased to advise that we have so succeeded. We've developed a document of 138 pages with 8 critical touch points for operational protocols, and that we have worked closely with the Ministry of Health in ensuring that all the critical health requirements are covered and connected within that protocol. Also, that the international community has seen and has given their full approbation, and indeed, the Jamaica protocols are the only one in the world so far that has had the World Travel and Tourism Council's seal, travel seal as they call it, of approval that it is indeed an acceptable protocol. We are also working to ensure, and I do have a meeting on the 18th with the UNWTO in securing also their seal of approval so that Jamaica will have its protocol being approved by the 2 mega global tourism entities, the UNWTO and the WTTC. The second element, of course, is the training of all sector workers, and also for them to become familiarized with the protocols that we've established, and for them also to understand the new behavioral patterns moving forward. I think it is well known that COVID has created what is being referred to as a new norm, a norm which in fact is changing with the day, as COVID does. But tourism, being accustomed to uncertainties and changes, is well positioned to respond and to enable the level of experiences that visitors will always be delighted in. So we have so far trained over 13,000 workers since the 1st of April to today. And we have trained them in a number of disciplines, 11 disciplines in all, most of which entailed health protocols. And we have also brought in 2 key courses for which they've been certified. One in languages, and Spanish being the principal language. And that program we did with the University of the West Indies online for them, as well as a new program, Tourism and Law, also with the University of the West Indies. And for that, some of the senior staff members, managers, and so on, 67 of them in all, have been enrolled. We have also ensured that a number of the workers are provided with critical PPEs. And that's the third element of our strategy, is to enable and to educate all our workers, and particularly the sector overall, in terms of the strategies around COVID security infrastructure, mask, infrared machines, and different types of face coverings that are required, as well as uniform and other equipment. The third critical area for us, of course, having said that, strategies for COVID security equipment, the fourth then is communication. And that we have been doing. We've had an extensive program with the international community almost every day. We have been involved in communicating with our partners and finding out what best practices have been, looking at what the market is saying and what our airline partners are saying. And the final area, of course, is the staggered approach to the reopening. And that one is a very key one, because we know that the industry couldn't be opened, carte blanche, but it can be open in a staggered and managed way, and in a structured way, and in a way that will fulfill our obligations to our country, as well as our responsibility to our partners. And so I just wanted to indicate 2 quick things before we have further conversations. One is that on the 15th, we will have 7 flights that will come in. And during the period 15th to the 30th, we're expecting to have about 70 flights into Jamaica overall. That will bring us somewhere in the region of about uh, five to 6,000 visitors over that period. And that's important to us. It's a start, and it's a start that is going to be vital, because we need to ensure that the capacity is there to manage that kind of flow, and health and security, as well as tourism, are going to be central players in ensuring that management overall. We've also certified a number of our properties. We've gone through, I think, 106 accommodations. 35 entities have identified their readiness to actually start, and all are being given the COVID resilience certificate by the Tourism Product Development Company. The final point that I wanted to make on this is that we have established a special corridor, which is a prescribed geographic area that will be the area that we begin operating as a tourism facility over the next 2 weeks, starting on the 15th. And the corridor will follow the main road from Negril all the way to Port Antonio. And it will embrace all the properties on what is called the seaward side of that highway. I will just quickly describe it for you. We will have the Negril. All of Negril will be embraced in this because of how Negril is structured. And then just as you get to Orange Bay, we begin now on all the properties on the seaside, then let's call it that, the seaside, all the way through Lucy, taking in Palladium, and all the properties leading into Montego Bay, Hopewell, Round Hill. Then we come into Montego Bay itself, and we follow Alice Eldermeyer Drive and Howard Cook, and we go over Queens Drive. So that would then embrace all the properties on the Gloucester Avenue area to the roundabout. And at the roundabout, we veer right through Flanker to the Elegant Corridor, all the way into Trelawney, continue on the highway through to St. Anne, into Ocho Rios. And in Ocho Rios, we follow the highway, the new highway. So we'll embrace the town of Ocho Rios in that, and continuing through Aracabessa, through Port Maria into Portland. So that's what the corridor will look like. And it will embrace small, medium, some villas, apartments, and all the accommodation facilities within that area. We are not yet opening to sporting facilities, to attractions, to nightclubs and so on. Those are not on for this first phase, nor are we doing in this phase the South Coast and the middle of the island. We want to focus on the northern area, where we have quite a number of tourism properties, of course, but the good news is that we're able to manage this area better, and health is able to coordinate and to do the tracing that is necessary, and the infrastructure for health support is within that area, so we'll be able to manage the risks better and to ensure that there is limited possibilities for community spread.
Much, Minister Bartlett, a very thorough explanation as to the position of the tourism space from July 15th, at least until the 30th, which is normally the period that the Cabinet and the Prime Minister, of course, reviews the protocols that are involved. I want to just, before we get into the question, to say in regards to the comments by Minister Bartlett, that the public health's position is supportive of the need for us to reopen our tourism industry, And I want that to be very clear. I know there have been some suggestions, perceptions around whether or not that support is there. And, generally speaking, public health supports the gradual reopening of the economy because we want the society to restore normality. We want persons to move from restrictions to freedom to move, to work, to play, to enjoy the life that they're accustomed to. So I want to disabuse any perception or thought that we are in any way, from a public health perspective anyway, against some of the decisions that have been taken. What is important, of course, is that we recognize that the balance has to be struck. And clearly, public health's role is to highlight with every decision what the risks are and how we will position ourselves to address those risks. And it is our fiduciary responsibility, it's our duty to do that. But it should not be misinterpreted or interpreted as an indication that we are not supportive. We work as one government. We are committed to the betterment of our society, to providing jobs, to creating economic opportunities, and tourism, of course, is an important part of that stay. And I just want to make it clear that we are committed. It's just a matter of how we manage that process. And the management of the process or the protocols around the process will become clearer over the next day or so. We will try to answer any questions that come now, but the Honorable Prime Minister will have a briefing tomorrow. And we are discussing a number of issues which are still unresolved, but making progress. And we will await his announcements, which we anticipate when we conclude will be made tomorrow in his press briefing, usually at 6 o'clock at the office of the Prime Minister. So let us move now into the questions. We know we have quite a number of questions. So Stephen, I'll ask you to take over from here.
Okay. Thank you very much, Minister. And thank you to all the ministers and the CMO for their presentations. We're going to invite our members of the media, our colleagues, to use the raised hand feature on Zoom and just to keep their questions as brief as possible. And we're going to interchange those questions as well with questions that we received online from members of the diaspora. We're going to go to Janet Silvera.
Good evening, ministers, colleagues. My questions are to Minister Bartlett and Minister Johnson Smith. Minister Bartlett, I understand that the pre-testing of tourists coming in is back on the table. I'd like to find out if that is actually the case, and if so, why? And the next question is the visitors that are coming in as of the 15th. Which of our source markets are they coming from? The question to Minister Johnson Smith is, Jamaicans that are coming in as of the 15th, that are coming in as tourists, are they also required to go to jamcovid19.com? And if so, why?
Okay, firstly, thanks, Janet. Pre-testing is not on the table, but testing is, and that all visitors and locals alike who are coming in as of the 15th will be tested. The second, the source market will be the US of A primarily. I think some from Canada, yes, from Calgary and Toronto, but USA, primarily the USA. Okay.
All right. Thank you very much for your question. And just to be clear, you are asking if Jamaicans coming in are tourists.
Yes, they're coming in as visitors, not as Jamaicans who were stranded, but Jamaicans who are coming to visit Jamaica as of the 15th of June.
Right.
If those visitors are expected, because they're Jamaican nationals, are expected to register on Jam COVID. And so, if yes, why?
Right. So everyone will be non-resident and non-resident will be registering on Jam COVID in one form or another, meaning everyone will have to be using an app that is going to have certain questions asked from health perspective and immigration perspective for entry to Jamaica. Because remember, it's not so much that our borders are fully open. We are entering, instead of controlled re-entry, we're now entering the phase of controlled entry because it's both residents and non-residents. And as had been explained, I believe at the last press briefing of the Prime Minister, there will be three categories of persons. There will be residents and non-residents who are ordinarily resident in Jamaica, so long stay persons on work permits, persons who are permanent residents here. There will be persons who come in for tourism and they are treated in and persons who are traveling for business for less than 14 days. Those are the three categories of persons who will be entering the island from the 15th to the 30th. And as I mentioned, they will all have to use an interface. I think Minister Bartlett will want to say more about how the tourism interface works, but it will be essentially the same backend, to use a technical phrase, the same information collected for entry into Jamaica. And that is because we are still in a pandemic. We're in a global pandemic, not a Jamaican pandemic or a Caribbean pandemic or an American pandemic. It is a global phenomenon, and therefore we have to strike the best balance possible, that as we open, as we change our restrictions and as we relax them, we have to balance with the health and safety of our nationals and the health and safety of travelers as well. And part of that is the screening that takes place when you register for Jam COVID. I don't think it should be looked at as a hurdle or something that you need to ask, why do they have to do it? It is a part of our management of risk and part of our support of the public health system to ensure that they have data that can assist them in tracing and assessing risk, while we also ensure that all who want to come to Jamaica, and it won't be everybody at first, but it will be built out, as Minister has just shared with you, that we have the best data in hand to assess what we can do next and to inform our decision making going forward. I hope that helps.
May I just say that I know that these procedures appear to be restrictive or certainly unusual, but again, one needs to bear in mind the circumstances and the context. Jamaica is not alone in tracking in a more detailed way the movement of people in the context of a pandemic that is transmitted and spread by people movement. Indeed, our opening up or relaxation of restrictions, if you will, because we really never closed totally, is moving at a faster pace than many jurisdictions. I mean, there are countries currently that are still pretty much on lockdown as it relates to persons coming in or going out, or certainly a lot more restrictive in who they allow in. And so what we would like Jamaicans to appreciate is that the Jam COVID application is really an attempt at gathering data to support the information that is required to appreciate the newness of the virus, the spread of the virus, and to help the process of mitigating or developing new systems and procedures to protect the population. So it is all in the interest of protecting the population. And over time, I am sure it is going to be phased out, maybe sooner rather than later. It's a function of the assessment that periodically takes place. And we hope that Jamaicans will view it, Jamaicans and non-Jamaicans actually, will view it in that light. I don't know if Minister Bartlett wants to add anything to that, but that's the sort of perspective that we hope that will be brought to bear on why we're doing what we're doing.
Okay, I wanted to add something to indicate where Jamaica stands in the global community in terms of our re-entry arrangements. And I must say that when we speak to the partners in the world, who I communicate with almost every day, they are really fascinated by the procedures and the protocols that Jamaica has been adopted. And particularly they are interested in the JAM-COVID application, because they think that this offers an excellent opportunity, first of all, for the persons who are coming to Jamaica to have a sense themselves of their own readiness to make the journey, as it asks questions which will enable them to do that. But it also provides the host countries with the best information that you could possibly get on health profiles, as well as to indicate what you should do in your own destination to make those people very comfortable and to give them a seamless experience. And I think that Jamaica invented, in fact, introduced to the world the new demographic that is going to characterize the COVID traveler. And in fact, we've called them the Generation C. That's Generation COVID. And this generation are now interested in health and wellness. They're interested in safety and security. They're interested in ensuring that countries that they go to practice these touch points for safety and security, such as social distancing, that they also wear masks, that they are interested in having all the gadgetry that secures them as per what is required for this new COVID security equipment arrangements that are now around. So Jamaica is leading the way with that. Technology use to create seamlessness through COVID-19 Jamaica app. And then, of course, this very, very powerful set of protocols that we have put forward that the world has accepted. So I think in an interesting way, Jamaica is leading the way in terms of enabling seamlessness and a higher level of security for the new COVID visitors of the world.
Thank you very much, ministers. Just want to go to two questions quickly from online. One of the questions is, if I return to the island with proof of a COVID-19 test, negative, done within the last 24 to 48 hours before landing, will I still be subject to possible quarantine? And the second one, do tourists have the option to voluntarily take the COVID-19 test upon entry at their own cost to be exempted from the resilience corridor restriction?
Well, I think the first question, Minister Tufton will answer, and I'll deal with the second one. The second one is no, because the COVID resilience corridor is the designated area that all our visitors in phase one of the opening exercise will be. So there's no option outside of it, and all our visitors are going to be so advised. In fact, the market is being sensitized in this regard. So the answer is no, they won't have the option to not be in the corridor. Everyone who comes in this first phase, that is June 15 to 30, will operate within the corridor.
Thank you, Minister. And in terms of the testing, we will, during this period, and it's important that we mention the period in question, we will still test persons coming in, irrespective of whether they have taken a test prior to coming. And the explanation is relatively simple. We have had cases of persons coming in who have had tests or provided information that they have had tests done, and they ended up testing positive. So it's important for our public health infrastructure to capture the information to allow for the assessment in order to manage the process going forward, even while we lift restrictions further. Remember now, it's a risk-based approach, and so there are some persons who are coming in who will not be tested, and with the Honourable Prime Minister did speak to that, the bubble countries, some specific countries, based on the assessment of those jurisdictions. So the question would apply to those countries that are assessed from a risk perspective, where we conclude that they require testing. In terms of quarantining or isolation, it's a function of what those test results indicate. Clearly, if you have a positive test, then we would have to provide isolation services and appropriate treatment. If not, then the opposite is true.
Thank you very much, Minister. Debbie Ann Wright from RGR is asking, has any decision been made in relation to going ahead with the field hospital at the arena?
Yes, we actually made it public that we would no longer be pursuing that option. We are looking at an alternative, which is to look at an existing facility, one of our hospitals, and building out additional capacity at that facility in anticipation or in preparation for the possibility of using that facility. We took that decision because we felt that the cost of putting in a temporary facility, which would have to be dismantled after a while, would be better applied to a permanent structure, even if it's a relatively smaller structure. And so the answer to the question is no, we're not going ahead anymore with those plans.
Right. And her follow-up question, Minister, is the ministry confident it has enough testing capacity and material as it prepares for the arrival of more Jamaicans and tourists?
I'll ask the CMO to respond to that.
Right. So at present, our anticipation is that over the next 2 weeks, from the June the 15th to the 30th, we would be doing between 500 to 700 tests on visitors that are arriving. This is going to be in addition to whatever testing that we're doing in terms of our surveillance protocols within Ireland. And so we are making the necessary preparations to be able to efficiently manage this amount of tests over the period.
Thank you very much, CMO. We're going to go to Brittany Clark.
Okay, hello, good evening, everyone. So I have two questions. The first I'll direct at Minister Bartlett. So with regard to the resilient corridor, based on your explanation, you're saying it's only for the North Coast and doesn't include the hotel industry in Kingston and St. Andrew. So my question is now, does this involve Airbnbs, and how will tourists be monitored to ensure that they do not go outside of the boundaries outlined in the corridor? And also, what are the bookings looking like after the 15th with regard to tourism numbers?
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, let's look at the bookings. The bookings after the 30th is reasonably robust. We're seeing an uptick. We are looking at somewhere in the region of about 45% of last year between July and August. We will see, of course, a dip in September, October, and then we're looking at even to November. We're beginning to see the pacing for November also picking up strong, tending towards a good winter. We think that the resilient corridor, being perhaps representative of a little over 85% of all the tourism assets in Jamaica, is well positioned to deal with a good mix of all the visitors who would come. Airbnb, we have been in discussion with the leadership of Airbnb. In fact, we were on a program with the vice chairman a few days ago. And that platform, we're encouraging not to be part of this first phase because it's difficult for us to track the visitors who will be coming dispersed all over Jamaica, the way in which Airbnb is structured. So, we're avoiding that. The business tourism, as was indicated by Minister Johnson Smith, I think that's a lot more of Kingston. And so Kingston is going to be featuring more in terms of the third element of the visitor group that is coming, which will be the business.
All right. Thank you very much, Minister. We're going to go to Jamaica Social.
Hi, thank you, and good evening to everyone. I have two questions essentially. One to the CMO. The two critically ill patients, are they on ward as critically ill, or are they in the ICU? And what can you tell us of their status outside of critically ill, bad, critically ill, kind of improving? What's their stage? As well as this question, either the Minister of Health or Mrs. Kamina Johnson-Smith can speak on regarding repatriated Jamaicans on these flights. What is the protocol on these flights? I mean, are they being spaced 2 seats apart? What is the I mean, these planes are, I wouldn't say are the largest, and the numbers seem pretty great, especially from that batch coming out of New York. Can you run us through just in a couple seconds as to what is the process, and how do you keep those protocols as you come into Jamaica, which is so laden with so many protocols right now? Thank you.
Right. So both patients remain critically ill. They are in the intensive care unit of the hospital that they are in, and we continue to monitor them closely every day.
The airline protocols. Well, everyone is expected to wear masks and gloves where possible at the airport and on the flight, as well as each airline has their own specific, I would say, equation for how they deal with the distancing of seats. So some JetBlue, for example, has been running their flights at 96 seats, 96 passengers as a maximum, which allows for spacing in between. And this is the type of approach that's being taken by all of the airlines, although I don't have the specific formulas that each use. But yes, everyone is expected to wear their masks, to follow sanitation rules. Sanitation facilities are in airports now at both ends of the spectrum. So everyone is expected to follow all of the basic protocols, which are becoming a way of life.
Thank you very much, Minister. Two more of our questions from our online participants. It says, how will non-nationals who own property in Jamaica but are not Jamaican residents be classified if they are not traveling for tourism purposes? And will tourists be allowed to visit attractions outside the corridor and stay in areas? What about transportation to the airport in curfew hours? Mr. Bartlett.
So you want to speak to the long term? It's really a long term stay. Someone who owns property here but not a national, and would be coming in, and how we treat
permanent residents. The first category. The first category are residents and non-residents who are here for long stay, which would be on a work permit basis or permanent residency stamp, or any lengthy period that is not part of you going into a touristic location, into the corridor. So you would be part of the risk-based assessment, you would be part of the stay-at-home orders where those are relevant, and you would be tested based on the health protocols that are assigned and implemented.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to go to Emma Lewis.
Good evening. Okay, a question about the older Jamaicans and visitors. Jamaicans aged 65 and over are being told to stay at home as the most vulnerable group to COVID-19. I'm not sure whether you're seeking to relax those strictures at some point. But anyway, what is the procedure for visitors in that age group? Will they be allowed to travel around like all the other tourists, despite being in the vulnerable age group? And my second concern is the drastic decrease in the wearing of masks around the island. The WHO put out recommendations last week, some new guidelines. But, you know, it seems as if a signal has gone out that, you know, we don't need to wear masks so much anymore and that it's sort of optional. And how is the ministry going to counteract this issue? How do you propose to do it? Because it's a problem, I think.
Okay. So there is no age discrimination against a non-visitor who is coming for vacation, so a tourist. And Minister Bartlett was quite explicit, I think, in terms of the corridor and what a tourist coming in would be allowed to do. And that would apply across the board. So there would be no added restrictions because someone is over 65. There are some restrictions on movement generally within the corridor, and that would apply to all concerned. As it relates to the wearing of masks, it is a concern, Emma. The ministry is attempting, and I've actually done so in a very practical way by going into Halfway Tree Square, and I will be moving around the country, but that will be supported by public education, public information. We have to get Jamaicans to appreciate that a big part of confronting this health threat is personal responsibility, which is why we say everyone counts. It's important that we recognize the role that we have to play, and the virus is still very much out there, still represents a threat, particularly to persons who represent vulnerable communities, persons with underlying conditions, over a certain age, persons in certain institutions and so on. But generally speaking, the population has an important role to play. So our role as a ministry is to continue to educate, to inform, to motivate, to persuade, to demonstrate, and the government specific orders around mask wearing are very clear, and where necessary we will have to enforce those also. But it is a fact that we have seen signs of complacency, and part of it is that we seem to have become victims of our own successes, in that we have done fairly well in terms of controlling the virus, and some persons have interpreted that to mean that the virus is no longer a threat, and that would be a mistake. And so it's a matter of how we continue to drive that message home.
In fact, I just wanted to add to that one of the big push in our area is to ensure that all the workers, for example, in the industry and those who are coming back will lead the way in terms of wearing, facial protective gears. To that extent, we have bought 10,000 face masks for the workers and other players in the industry, and those will be distributed to them ahead of the 15th.
I just want to add a little word to that, to answering that question, because in the management of any outbreak, we spend a lot of time sensitizing the public and increasing awareness. And despite all the different measures, there comes a point in time when the public starts to become desensitized and they start to revert to normal. But I really would want to just remind Jamaicans at this particular point in this epidemic, we're at a very critical juncture when we are reopening the country to persons coming in. And so now is a time more than ever that every Jamaican has to have that responsibility, not just for themselves, but for their neighbors and for everybody that they come in contact with, to spread the word that the outbreak is not over. It is not over, and this is the most critical point as we make changes in how we manage, because with new populations coming in, there are the risks that are there of exposure. And so it is critical that everyone takes that personal responsibility to protect themselves and to protect the vulnerable in our society to prevent spread and the risk of more severe illness in the population.
Thank you very much, CMO. Thank you, ministers. We're going to go to 80 degrees north.
Hello?
Yes,
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
Go ahead, Zara.
Good evening, everybody. 3 questions quickly. Can rapid tests be used, let us say, before boarding? Because I saw where some are available results within minutes. Any consideration given to using rapid tests prior to boarding to come here for tourists? The second question is, when they do come here and if they test positive, what is the repatriation protocol to get them out of our system as soon as possible? And then question 3, Minister Tufton, I know you mentioned a while ago that people here in Jamaica, based on the article that was written today, need to be patient. However, when it's tourists who are obviously paying their money each day, it's expensive to be patient. You've been telling us about also staff issues. What is the protocol in place to help tourists to get their results as soon as possible when they get here?
Okay, I think CMO, you could probably take on the first question about rapid testing.
Right. So by rapid testing, I'm going to assume that you mean antibody testing. Is that so? No, okay. All right. I just want to say, if we are going to test, then we should use a test that is going to give us the best information. I think right across the world, persons have recognized the fact that antibody testing is not good for diagnostic testing. So if you want to know if somebody has the illness, then you need to test for the virus itself, and that is to use the PCR testing. The antibody testing will have been used in different populations to be able to give a general sense of whether the exposure level of the population, and that is still the recommended use by the international authorities on how antibody testing can be used. So we have seen across the world, again, the different experiences where some airlines have been using antibody testing and the high level of unreliability associated with those testing. And when persons have gone into country and done the testing for the virus, then you get a different result. So I think, if we are going to test and if we're going to require tests, we need to use a test that we can rely on the information that is being provided. And antibody testing is not the way to go.
On the other question, as it relates to a tourist who may test positive, this is not the first time we have had non-Jamaicans here in Jamaica who have tested positive for COVID-19. The obligation of any jurisdiction, once someone is in your territory or on your grounds and have an issue, a medical issue, is not to try to ship them out as quickly as possible, using your words. It is to provide appropriate levels of care and attention for them to recover. So in the event that we have non-Jamaicans who test positive, then we would have an obligation to see to their well-being and welfare until they recover and are in a sufficiently safe position to return to their particular jurisdiction. And that would be the protocol for tourists who come in. The other issue around the challenges of weight, as displayed today in one of the printed newspapers. Zara, the truth is that we have done far better than we give ourselves credit for. And indeed, I would be prepared to say that the challenges that we have faced as it relates to testing and test results have been more the exception rather than the norm. Indeed, we have administered over 15,000 tests, and the fact that periodically, and I stress periodically, we get concerns expressed, and I don't take anything away from those concerns, because we listen, we learn, and we make the adjustments as necessary. I think it's expected, given the newness of this approach and the challenges we face, that you're going to have these hiccups periodically. And whenever they arise, we deal with them. So I wasn't trying to provide an excuse for what is a normal occurrence. I was trying to explain what is an outlier scenario to an otherwise efficient process of returning tests within a relatively short space of time. And we will learn from that and try to improve that. But we are restricted by numbers in terms of the public health team, and there are going to be downtime in terms of the mechanics of the process, because we're dealing with machines, we're dealing with people. They can become sick. Machines will have to be tuned up or adjusted. Tests can be faulty and have to be redone. Those are all expected part of the process, and normally you account for those as a percentage of the overall numbers. And I would be prepared to say we have not gone beyond a 5%, should I say, challenge. Otherwise, I think for the most part we have done fairly well. But we will continue to learn from the process and improve. The protocol as it relates to the tourists and the Jamaicans coming in, the non-Jamaicans and Jamaicans, is to try and turn those test results within, is it 24 hours? 24 to 48 hours. And we have done well so far, for the most part.
Which is our turnaround time now.
This has happened. So, you know, where it hasn't has been the exception. And we believe that we will continue on this trajectory and perhaps even improve it, even while we have to do the same for non-Jamaicans coming in.
Yeah. And so, team, just to indicate, as an additional layer in terms of the response and the response protocols, we are currently in discussion with a number of insurance providers to offer COVID protection insurance for visitors who are coming. And we're also in touch with an international logistics group about repatriation of those who are tested positive. We're very advanced in that discussion. We may not be able to start on the 15th, but we expect that that will be done in short order somewhere towards the end of the month. We should be able to conclude those discussions and arrangements. So we're looking far beyond just the normal methods of management of the crisis. We're going to layer it with response initiatives that are well accepted and will enable us to reduce the exposure of infected visitors to Jamaica.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're going to come now to our final sets of questions. We have follow-ups from Brittany, and then we'll go to Janet. Brittany?
Okay, hello, good evening again. This one is from Minister Tufton, or the CMO. So there have been some complaints from persons who tested for COVID-19 in the past who say they're yet to receive results. Minister Tufton, you would have explained some of the reasons earlier in the conference, but there are suggestions that the ministry may have actually lost or misplaced a number of samples, which is also contributing to the delay. And the ministry state whether or not this is so. And is there any updates on the deportees who recently returned to the island? Have they been released from quarantines?
Well, I've spoken about the issues around delays. You're specifically mentioning the possibility of lost samples. I'm not aware of any of samples being lost or misplaced. I am aware of persons being required to do sampling, having done it before, and there are a couple of reasons for that. It could be the fact that persons are doing the release sampling. Remember, after having a positive, you have to get 2 negatives. So before you're released, if you get a negative and a positive, then you have to do another sample. And sometimes we probably need to explain that a little more, because I suspect that not everybody understands fully. But again, there are other reasons why a sample could become faulty or result inconclusive, and there's a requirement to resample. It's inconvenient to those who have to provide the sample. I've done sampling and testing, and I understand the discomfort that is involved, and of course the weight and the anxiety around that. So we fully appreciate all of that, but there could be 3-4 reasons why that is the case, and it's not necessarily what most persons may think, that the public health persons have lost the samples. It could be several other reasons.
With regards to the involuntary returned migrants that came into the country on the 28th, so today the 11th would be day 14, and so therefore we would have done tests for them between the 9th and the 10th. So we would be getting back results today, and I am not sure where we are in the discharge process as yet, but by the end of the day we would know where we are in terms of test results for those persons and whether or not they would be ready for discharge. We know that we did have 2 that were positive initially, and so those persons would be staying a little bit longer because they would be in isolation.
Thank you very much, CMO. I'm going to go to Janet Silvera.
Thank you again. My question is to Minister Bartlett and testing of visitors as of now, because originally the Prime Minister had said that because our numbers coming into the airport in Montego Bay were so large, between 200 to 300 persons, it would be difficult to do testing of visitors coming in. What has changed to cause us to now be testing visitors coming in? Also, will the testing take place in the airport, and will the testing be for free?
Did I hear all of what you had to say, Janet? I thought you cut off somewhere after you said something like, will the visitors be tested in the airport? I didn't hear the rest of it.
Oh,
Wow.
Are you hearing me, Minister?
I wonder why you're muted.
Maybe I can help you, Minister.
I know you like to talk to me, so.
Okay. Will the visitors be tested in the airport, and will the testing be free? What has caused us to change our minds as it relates to the visitors now being tested coming into Jamaica?
Well, the good news is that you do have the minister and the CMO, who are the best place to answer this very important question. So I just defer to them.
Thank you, Minister, for that redirecting. All right. I mean, I could, but you want to take a first cut at it, and then I'll come in, CMO. But okay, well, let me just explain what the situation is. The approach to testing as part of the overall protocol is, simply put, a function of risks. We are guided by assessing the risk that is involved based on a particular point in time and a particular context. We are still maneuvering the approach to managing the virus. It's still novel, meaning the population is still not as exposed, even though we have had several positives, largely because I think we have done a relatively good job on the ground to contact trace, to cauterize, and to extract from the population the positive cases that we have had, initially through imports and to a lesser extent through persons spreading from an imported case. The new lifting of restrictions, both for Jamaicans and non-Jamaicans, has brought a different risk profile of managing the virus. And it's a risk profile that, from a public health perspective, we need to understand. And to understand it, we need to manage in a way that gathers the information, as much information as possible, and then use that information to more specifically determine the risk, and use that appreciation of risk to develop a series of protocols or actions to mitigate against the risk. Now, it's not a risk-free exercise. There are always going to be risks, and the population needs to come to terms with that, because I believe sometimes the conversation is that we must allow freedom in full swing, but we must not have any risk at all, and there's no such thing. So it's firstly, how do you appreciate what that risk involves? So over the last 2 weeks meaning up to this weekend, we have allowed significantly more Jamaicans to come into the country, and we have tested everybody, and we have tested everyone, and to the extent that we have had the results so far, we have had a 1.6% positive rate. Now, what that says, coming from a jurisdiction that is supposed to be high risk, many of them out of New York and Florida, it says to us that that area at least gives us a risk profile that we can adjust the testing mechanism while we put other contingencies in place to mitigate that relatively limited risk. The truth is, if we had a 20% positive, 25%, 15%, 10%, it would pose to us a different risk profile that would require a different type of response. And so we're encouraged by the fact that 98.4% of those coming in tested negative. And so testing for locals coming in may be adjusted, may be done away. That's something that we will have to discuss and address. For the non-Jamaicans, and in particular the tourists coming in, we need to appreciate and understand that risk profile too. And in order to understand that risk profile, we have to gather the information, just as we did with the locals. And I want to make it clear for those who think that we have been somehow discriminating in support of one over the other, or in support of the tourists over the Jamaican, that no such thing. We just are trying to understand the different populations in protecting our population, and frankly speaking, protecting our economic interests, because tourism is an important economic interest, provides jobs, provides a lot for both the direct involved and those who are indirectly involved, farmers and so on. But we need to understand the risk profile. And so what has changed? I don't think anything has changed. I know that there has been some speculation or utterances that suggest that we were going to take a particular route, but I think based on the advice and the assessment, the decision has been to appreciate the risk a little more, and then from there to make some more concrete decisions based on information. And that is what we are setting out to do with the support of all of government, including the Minister of Tourism.
To make a clarification. Right. I just want to clarify that so the overall positivity rate for the Jamaicans coming in was 2.3%, and essentially there were two groups within that. You had the cruise ship workers, and then you had the Jamaicans that were coming from residencies. So in terms of the cruise ship workers, we had a 3.3% positivity rate, and then it was a 1.6% for the Jamaicans who were coming from probably their homes or other residencies. But I just want to also make a clarification in terms of testing, because I want us to remember that testing is a one-off measure. It's a one-off measure, and it just gives you an answer no if the person is positive or negative. But in terms of the real pickup of whether persons have infection comes with the monitoring that happens after the person comes in. So if the person is tested and they are negative, we don't have there's no complete sense of comfort that is there, because it's really the monitoring that happens after that tells you. And the increased hotel surveillance in terms of the tourists that are coming in, that is where our pickup is going to come up, is going to just as how surveillance in country, where it is when persons develop symptoms that they present to hospital or to the health centers, and we do the test and we find out that they are now positive. That is where the real surveillance is going to come in. It's not really from the testing of the persons as they come in. That gives you a no. But we have to move and we have to concretize our hotel-based surveillance where we monitor persons, and part of the tourism protocols is about having persons within the hotel, the healthcare workers within the hotels, to do that surveillance, to pick up whenever you have a tourist that starts to develop symptoms, or a hotel worker that starts to develop symptoms, and then they are trained to do the appropriate thing to isolate those persons, to have the necessary medical checks, and to refer to the health department for appropriate follow-up. That is where we are going to have to focus in the future. So I know that right now we are focusing on testing when persons are coming in, but remember now, based on what our experience so far is that our pickup rate has been very low at that point of entry. And over the next 2 weeks, as we test the tourists that are coming in, we're going to see what that pickup rate is going to be like. And that is going to help us determine what we do in the future. But Jamaicans must focus on the real type of surveillance that is where we're going to do the pickup or monitoring of persons when they are here in the country, not necessarily just a test as they're coming in.
Thank you very much. Same, I just want to ask one more question and the Minister will give the closing remarks. Minister Johnson Smith, somebody says, I've completed the JAM COVID-19 process and are waiting to hear from you why others are able to call airlines and book tickets without the required code. Why is that so?
I know that where some airlines had bookings taken already, they have had a different process in place, so people may have been able to access, but many people are finding in that circumstance that their flights are actually being cancelled. So if you have been through the process, if you have applied, once you have your approval, then you book your flight. And there's no reason that shouldn't work well for you. If there is an issue, use the support line. Go into FAQs where you'll find the phone number and the email address that you can contact someone to give you technical support if you think you do need some.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all our media colleagues and those who submitted their questions online. I'm going to ask our Minister Tufton to give his closing remarks.
First of all, I want to just give my colleague ministers a minute or so just to summarize if they think there's any important points to raise, starting with Minister Johnson Smith.
Thank you. Thank you, Minister. I will use my time for thanks. I have to say thank you to my most incredible staff at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, in particular the consular teams located here at Capitol, as well as those overseas. My team here has to support persons at 23 missions overseas across an innumerable number of time zones. 13,000 people, if you can imagine that, writing, expecting their the most careful, sensitive, and thoughtful answers on everything regarding travel arrangements, what they should do about medication, how they can deal with their families, arrangements to be put in place, things which are way beyond the scope of foreign affairs, and anything they may have been trained for. And they have been working overtime and without care for self in many circumstances to make sure that our nationals are given the care that they are able to give and to bring them home safely. And I want to express my sincere thanks to them and to recognize the incredible work that they're doing. I also want to say a very brief thank you to the governments of the United Kingdom and the government of Canada, both of whom this week worked with us to ensure that we had repatriation flights in place. On just Wednesday, just yesterday, we were able to bring in 84 people from Canada at the shortest of notice because an opportunity came up. Again, working with High Commissioner Peters here, she was able to liaise with her headquarters and get facilitation for us for these persons. My team called 400 people for us to identify the 84 persons who were able to and desirous of taking the flight. And if you think of what would go into that over a 48-hour period, you can understand the nature of some of the work. So again, thank you to all our partners. Thank you, Canada. Thank you, UK. And thank you to my incredible team at Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade. Thank you, Minister.
Minister Bartlett.
Well, having set this stage so well, Minister Johnson Smith, I suspect I'll have to follow suit, because the tourism workers, both here at the ministry and our agencies, as well as the partners in the private sector, have been relentless in pursuing a very, very strong arrangement to bring about this phase opening that will commence on the 15th. The work is going on and it will not stop, but I have to pause to give thanks to all of those, particularly those who have worked on the protocol that have come out as a world-class document for which Jamaica has been well positioned and indeed very well extolled. I feel very, very proud as Minister in regards to the work that they have done so far. So I want to thank them. But I also want to thank the Ministry of Health for the level of collaboration and support that we've had over the period in helping to develop some of those protocols and indeed to help us to fine-tune the arrangements that are now being put in place for the testing arrangements at the airport and for the recovery programs that we are working together on. I think that this this immediate situation for us in Jamaica offers a great challenge. I'm satisfied that the nation is ready for the reopening of the economy. Tourism plays a very vital role in that process, and all our partners are now putting together the necessary equipment, support, and training and development, as well as a mindset that is going to take us into another phase, the phase of managing with COVID and post-COVID. Thank you very much for the opportunity today.
Thank you, Minister Bartlett, as usual. And the CMO wants to just make a quick point.
Right. So the involuntary return migrants, those that had their 14-day repeats done yesterday or the day before, those were all negative and they were discharged today. The second point I just want to make, somebody asked at our last press conference about the take-up of the appointments on the Jam COVID site. Having reviewed that information, what we recognize is that not many persons are registering to do the test on the Jam COVID site, and as a matter of fact through the hotlines. And I would want to appeal to persons that surveillance within the population is very important at this time. We know that we've had several positives within the country, and it's very important for us to pick up if there are cases across the country. So to take advantage of the opportunity, one, to make an appointment on the Jam COVID site to do a test. You can call the health departments as well to arrange to do a test, or you can call the Ministry of Health hotline and they will refer you to your case would be referred to the health department for a test to be done. When you call to do the test, you will go through an interview process, and if your case is suggestive that you need to have a test done, then it will be arranged. So please make use of this opportunity to have yourself tested.
Thank you very much, CMO. Okay, so the task is mine to just bring the curtains down on this discussion. I want to thank, of course, my colleague ministers Johnson Smith and Bartlett for sharing the stage with me this evening. I think the responses to the queries, to the questions from both ministers hopefully would have created much better understanding around some of the concerns or curiosities of Jamaicans or otherwise. Thank the CMO as usual and the rest of the health team and the production team that are here at our Emergency Control Center in New Kingston. This is really a collaborative effort, and I'm hoping that today's briefing representing 3 ministries and a range of issues and questions demonstrates again, reinforces the all of government approach to addressing the COVID risk that we face. I really do believe, and I'm, this is not just logical or intellectual, no, this is almost emotional, that Jamaica has risen to the occasion, that Jamaicans have demonstrated dedication and commitment to this fight, for those who are on the front line and those being the critical support teams, and for those who have been inconvenienced, whether here or abroad, whether in business or otherwise. Jamaicans generally have shown tremendous understanding and support for the cause that we have had to take on. And we have seen the benefits or the results of that. I believe we will continue to see the benefits and the results of the effort and the commitment and the togetherness. And if COVID has done nothing else for us as a people, I believe it has brought us together. And that is a positive thing. It has caused us to reflect and to recognize that no man is an island. We have to work together. I'm proud to be Jamaican, and I'm proud to be a part of this era, despite the risks and despite the challenges, and proud to work alongside so many Jamaicans who are part of the solution. So on behalf of the health team and all others who are online and here in studio, I want to just say thanks again, and we'll catch up with you in the days ahead as we move to the next phase to ensure that we manage this process while giving Jamaicans the opportunity to live, to work, to enjoy their lives as Jamaicans. Thank you. God bless.
Hi everybody. Now the economy is reopening, CSEC and CAPE students are back at school and tourists are coming back. There's so many questions about how all this is going to work in the era of COVID-19. So that's a focus of our upcoming RGR Gleaner Group virtual town hall meeting. That's going to be taking place Thursday at 8:35 p.m. So we want you to send in your questions, video questions as well, to 3810072. That's 3810072. If you're sending in a video question, please keep your phone like this. Do not send us video questions like this. So remember, horizontal, not vertical. Send in also your comments and your responses that you want us to include in the town hall. We look forward to seeing you.
Hi there, I'm Simon Preston from TVJ. Thank you very much for watching our YouTube channel. To see our latest videos and also to see live events, click here. To see our full videos on onespotmedia.com, click here. Thank you very much for watching.